Johnny Carson was the best late-night TV host for many years, a smart and charming person who seemed to have everything. Things got strange after they were out of the spotlight, though. He went away. Nothing in public, not even interviews. Just quiet. Come with us as we try to figure out the quiet mystery of Johnny Carson's last years and why one of TV's biggest stars decided to quit. Growing up and who you are. Johnny Carson was born in Corning, Iowa on October 23, 1925. Corning is a small town in the Midwest of the United States. He was the middle child of Homer and Ruth Carson's 3 kids. Because Johnny's dad worked for a power company, the family moved around a lot when he was young. The Carson family finally found a place to live in Norfolk, Nebraska, where Johnny would spend most of his youth. The people in Norfolk were quiet and religious, and daily life was easy and regular there. Carson said in the future that it was a place that made him feel normal, even if it wasn't always fun. Johnny was quiet and kept to himself when he was a kid. He wasn't the kind of kid who likes to make friends quickly or speak up in class. He was often called shy by other people. He seemed to enjoy looking and thinking more than talking or interacting with other people, even when he was very young. He liked being alone in his room or lost in his own thoughts the most. Carson found magic when he was 12 years old, and it changed his whole life. He borrowed a book from the library called The Golden Book of Magic, and it caught his attention. Right away, he felt in charge and amazed when he used magic. He could work on it by himself and get better at it. His first shows were for family and friends, and he went by the name The Great Carson. It was at these early shows that Carson learned how to talk to people in his own way. He wasn't very friendly in real life, but being on a small stage gave him a chance to talk, entertain, and be someone else, even if only for a short time. Carson's performance and his ability to keep people at a remove were both helped by magic. He was sure of himself, funny, and interesting on stage. He was quiet and private when he wasn't on stage. He would keep moving in this way for the rest of his life. Over time, a lot of people said Carson had 2 sides: the charming performer that millions of people watched on TV and the shy, private man that not many people actually knew. He joined the U.S. Navy when he was only 17 years old, during World War II. He was an ensign on the USS Pennsylvania and was stationed in the Pacific. He never went into battle, but his time in the service taught him structure and discipline. Besides that, he learned how to keep calm under pressure, which would become one of his trademarks on The Tonight Show. Carson did magic tricks for his fellow sailors from time to time, using performance as a safe way to talk to other people again. Even when he was in uniform, he felt more at ease making people laugh than letting their guard down. He went to the University of Nebraska-Lincoln after the war. He first studied journalism, but later changed his major to speech and theater. He started doing comedy shows and hosting a radio show while he was in college. He got his first taste of reporting through this event. When he finished in 1949, he was ready to start working in radio and TV. He still kept his distance from other people, but he had found his calling, entertaining people from behind a camera or microphone. One of the most important things that shaped Carson's emotional personality was his bond with Ruth, his mother. Many people who knew Ruth said that she was cold, critical, and didn't show love very often. Carson supposedly spent a lot of his life trying to make her like him, but he never felt like he did. He once said, "She never said, 'I love you.'" This lack of warmth at home probably made it harder for him to show how he felt later in life. He learned early on to hide his feelings and avoid emotional conversations. This emotional wall became a part of who he was, both personally and professionally. Carson's personality was different when he was off camera than when he was on. On TV, he was funny, friendly, and quick to laugh. He made guests feel at ease and knew how to work a crowd. When he wasn't on camera, he often avoided small talk and would leave conversations without warning. Others who worked with him said he could be friendly one minute and cold the next. He didn't like being open, so he didn't let people get too close. The man who made Johnny Carson an American icon After graduating from the University of Nebraska in 1949, Carson was ready to start his career in broadcasting. At the time, most people in the business started out small. Carson's first real job was as a morning show host at WOW Radio and Television in Omaha, Nebraska, where he also worked on writing and performing comedy routines. Carson was funny and had a sharp mind, which made him stand out right away. Carson didn't stay in Nebraska for long. In the early 1950s, he moved to Los Angeles to try his luck in television. His big break came when he started working as a comedy writer for Red Skelton, a popular TV comedian. When Skelton got hurt right before a show, Carson took over and did a great job. It got the attention of people in the business. After this, Carson got more chances to host, first on the game show Earn Your Vacation, and then on the daytime show Who Do You Trust, where he really started to show how good he was with live crowds. It was on Who Do You Trust that Carson developed many of the skills that would make him famous later on. In his conversations with guests, he was calm and natural. He paid close attention, cracked jokes, and seemed genuinely interested in the people he talked to. He also had a clever sense of humor that made people feel smart without being mean. Viewers at home thought he was talking directly to them, and his easy charm made them feel at ease and trust him. Carson became famous all over the country when NBC needed a new host for The Tonight Show in 1962. The show had been running for years with different hosts, but NBC wanted someone new who could keep viewers interested night after night. Johnny Carson was the perfect choice. He took over the show on October 1st, 1962, and would stay as host for the next 30 years. Carson took late-night TV to a whole new level right from the start. He started each show with a monologue full of jokes about current events, celebrities, and himself. He was smooth in his delivery, and he knew how to make even the worst joke funny by pausing or smiling knowingly at the right time. But Carson wasn't always the friendly host people saw on TV. He was known to be very private and tightly controlled. His show. When a joke didn't land, he would often make fun of it, which made people like him even more. He wasn't afraid to say when something didn't work, and that made him seem real. People who worked for him had to be perfect, too. He didn't like surprises and liked things to go quickly and on time. He approved almost every script, joke, and segment. Some people liked how professional he was, but others found it hard to get close to him. Carson kept his personal life separate from his public life. Even people who worked with him for years often said they didn't really know him. He was polite but distant, friendly but not open, and he didn't like to talk about personal things or feelings. Writers and producers knew to keep their conversations with him short and all about work. Carson valued privacy and loyalty, and he didn't forgive easily when he felt betrayed. He hosted The Tonight Show until he retired in 1992, and by that time, he was one of the most loved and respected figures in American entertainment. About 50 million people watched his last show, which shows how deeply he had connected with viewers over the years. But Carson stayed emotionally stable on that last night. He thanked his staff and viewers, smiled softly, and said goodbye without tears, but with grace and calm. His time as host had made him famous. But Johnny Carson was a man who kept most of himself hidden, even when he was at the height of his fame. Next, we'll look at how that emotional distance affected his personal life. Carson's 4 marriages. His first marriage was to Jody Merrill Walcott in 1949, right after college. Before they got married, things seemed good between them. They had 3 sons, Christopher, Richard, and Corey. But problems started to show early on in their marriage. Carson was working hard to make a name for himself in radio and TV, and the long hours were wearing them down. His career kept him away from home a lot and made him emotionally unavailable. He was also known for cheating on his wife. The marriage ended in 1963 after years of fighting and mistrust. A few months later, Carson married Joanne Copeland, who would become his second wife. They were married from 1963 to 1972. For a while, they seemed like a glamorous couple because Joanne was a model and TV personality. But things were not so great behind the scenes. Joanne later said that Carson was abusive, especially when he was drunk. She said he had a short fuse and a mean tongue, and he often said hurtful things about her, like about his first marriage. This one had problems with emotional distance and cheating because Carson was still spending most of his time on The Tonight Show, and Joanne often felt ignored. Carson married his third wife, Joanna Holland, in 1972. This one lasted longer, 13 years, but the same problems came back. Carson still had trouble with commitment and intimacy. Friends said he emotionally pulled away from his wife even when things seemed to be going well. He didn't like talking about feelings and avoided deep conversations. Joanna filed for divorce without warning in 1983. Carson was shocked, but he didn't try to stop her. The divorce was peaceful, and he moved on. Alexis Moss, who used to work at a stock brokerage, was Carson's fourth and final wife. They got married in 1987 and stayed together until he died in 2005. By this time, Carson was taking it easy at work and spending more time at home. Alexis kept a low profile and out of the public eye. Some say this was Carson's most peaceful relationship. Carson stayed by himself even while he was married. He had learned to deal with mental distance, and it had become a part of who he was. Carson has said in interviews that he wasn't good at relationships. "I gave more of myself to my show than to any relationship," he said. Always, his work came first. Not that he didn't care about the people in his life. He just didn't know how to show it. He liked order, routine, and peace. Relationships were messy, and he didn't like things that were hard to handle. Over time, his need for control drove people away and left him more and more alone. It was hard for Carson to be a father. With his first wife, he had 3 sons, Christopher, Rick, and Corey. He had a hard time connecting with them right away because he was away so much filming his show or traveling. When he was home, he didn't know how to talk to his sons about feelings or personal problems. Some people said his relationship with them was distant and even cold at times. Of the 3 boys, Rick Carson had the most troubled life. He had mental health problems for many years, including drug use and bouts of depression. Carson rarely talked about Rick's condition in public, but people close to the family said the relationship was full of missed chances. Carson didn't know how to help Rick, who felt abandoned by his father. They had a big emotional gap until the end. In 1991, Rick died in a car accident. He was 39 years old and driving down a steep road when his car went off a cliff. Carson was devastated by the news. They weren't close, but the loss hit him hard. People who knew him well said he became even more distant after Rick's death. He didn't talk about it much, not even with his other sons or close friends. He chose to grieve in silence, as he had done with most painful events in his life. This quiet mourning was a turning point. He became quieter and more private after Rick's death. His energy seemed to fade, and he started spending more time by himself. He went back to work for a short time after the tragedy, but he was never quite the same. The loss made him face how distant he had been from his own family. He had missed out on so much, and there was no way to get it back. In the years that followed, Carson rarely talked about Rick in interviews or public appearances. He also didn't use his show to talk about mental health or grief. Instead, he stayed even further away from the public eye. By the time he quit The Tonight Show in 1992, he rarely talked about Rick at all. His family relationships were broken and not many people really knew him well. He was stuck in the loneliness he had been seeking for a long time. Carson's failed relationships were not just a part of his story. They shaped the lonely life he lived in his last years. He built emotional walls around himself to protect himself, but they cut him off from the people who could have helped him feel better. His success, charm, and fame got him far, but they couldn't fix what was broken at home. Next, we'll look at how Carson's private struggles with alcohol, anger, and old grudges made him even more alone. He was calm and charming on TV, making people laugh and smile every night. But when he wasn't in front of the camera, Carson had serious problems. He was an alcoholic, had a temper that scared people, and held grudges that lasted for years. His fame made him successful, but it also gave him the power to push people away, and he used that power a lot. Carson's drinking was no secret to people who worked with him or knew him personally. He rarely drank at work, but his behavior off-screen was often caused by alcohol. People who knew him well said he drank to deal with stress, avoid having emotional conversations, and escape his feelings. But Carson sometimes showed a darker side of himself when he drank too much. His temper was sudden and harsh. He could be calm one minute and then erupt in anger the next. These mood swings got worse when he was drunk. He didn't usually show this side in public, but in private it was a different story. His second wife, Joanne Copeland, talked openly about how unpredictable he was after they got divorced. She said he often yelled and used mean words, especially after drinking. She also said he put people down with sarcasm and insults, even people he cared about. Stories from behind the scenes at The Tonight Show back up what Carson's wives and friends said. Some writers and producers said that he would stop talking to someone all of a sudden over a disagreement, even if it was a small one. Others said that he would storm out of meetings or lose his cool over a joke that didn't go as planned. One famous story has Carson punching a wall in a hotel during an argument, which shows how angry he could get. When Carson was angry, he would often shut down and not talk about how he felt. This was his way of dealing with conflict because he didn't like emotional conversations and didn't know how to deal with things openly. So, when something really upset him, especially if it felt like a betrayal, he would shut down. He drank a lot, kept his feelings to himself, and had a short fuse, which made it hard to make friends and keep romantic relationships healthy. People in his life often felt like they had to walk on eggshells because they didn't know how he would respond. He could be cold and distant, making people around him feel small or unimportant, even when he wasn't mad. Over time, more and more people were pushed out of Carson's life. He never got help for these problems in public. He didn't talk about them in interviews and rarely admitted he had problems. He wanted to keep up his perfect image. Those who knew him well, though, saw that these private fights hurt him a lot and made it hard for him to be close to anyone. Grudges that never healed. Carson's tendency to hold grudges was one of the clearest signs that he had emotional problems. If someone let him down or crossed a line, he would often cut them out of his life completely. There were no second chances with Carson. If they had a small argument, he would end the relationship and never look back. This happened with friends, co-workers, and even famous people who used to be close to him. His fight with Joan Rivers is probably the most well-known example of this. Rivers had been a guest host on The Tonight Show many times and talked a lot about how much she admired Carson. She saw him as a mentor and said he helped her rise in her career. But in 1986, Rivers took a job hosting her own late-night show on the new Fox network without telling Carson. Carson was deeply hurt and never forgave her. After they broke up, he wouldn't answer her calls, wouldn't let her back on The Tonight Show, and wouldn't talk to her again for the rest of his life. Even after Rivers' husband died and she publicly asked for peace, Carson wouldn't say a word. His refusal to make peace with someone who had once meant a lot to him showed how deeply he could hold a grudge. Another example is his fight with singer Wayne Newton. During a speech, Carson made jokes that Newton thought made him look weak, and Newton didn't take it lightly. Some reports say Newton even made threats against Carson. The two men never talked to each other again after that day. Carson never apologized or tried to fix the relationship. He is also said to have banned people from his show, including Family Feud host Richard Dawson. After a fight, Carson made it clear that Dawson was no longer welcome. He did this without making a public statement or giving an official reason. That was Carson's style. He cut people off quietly but completely. Once he made up his mind, that was the end of the road. These stories show how Carson's inability to forgive made his world smaller over time. More and more people left Carson's life over the years. Some left on their own because they were tired of walking on eggshells, while others were pushed out by Carson himself. Either way, he had fewer friends, fewer connections, and more emotional isolation. Because he never solved these problems, Carson had to carry the weight of them for years. People who knew him well could tell that he was sad about them, even though he never said a word about them. He often pretended not to care, but there were signs that he did. Not being willing to forgive left him with open wounds that never got better. In his later years, Carson rarely talked about these fights. Even though he tried to forget about the past, the damage was already done. The people he used to laugh with, work with, and trust were no longer in his life. Fame had given him everything he wanted, but it also gave him the tools to keep everyone away. The Great Disappearance. When Johnny Carson quit The Tonight Show in May 1992, he didn't just stop being on TV. Most famous people retire and still do things like give interviews, go to public events, or start new projects. But Carson didn't do any of those things. He made it clear that his time in the spotlight was over. After being in millions of homes every night for 30 years, the silence that followed was almost shocking. Carson's retirement meant the end of more than just a job. It also meant the end of a part of his life that he didn't want to go back to. He turned down all requests for interviews, tributes, and talk shows. Even when TV networks honored him with award ceremonies and retrospectives, he refused to take part. He wouldn't go on stage, give a speech, or even record a message. At first, many people didn't think Carson's retirement would last. They thought he might come back for a special or guest spot, but he never did. As time went on, it became clear that Carson meant what he said when he said goodbye. He retired and lived quietly in Malibu, California, in a home with a beautiful view of the Pacific Ocean. People only saw him when he was out on his boat or running errands around town. There were no paparazzi pictures of him at big parties or red carpet events because he didn't go to any of them anymore. Johnny Carson died on January 23, 2005, at the age of 79. Many people who smoke get emphysema, which is what killed Carson. He smoked for decades, both on and off the air. He quit later in life, but the damage was already done. Carson's death made headlines around the world, but the details were kept secret. There was no public funeral, memorial service, or big event with lots of famous people to honor him. A short statement from his family confirmed his death, and that was it. Carson had planned it this way. He didn't want a big funeral or public show. He had spent his last years alone, and he wanted to leave the world the same way. Many of Carson's friends and co-workers were saddened by how little they knew about those years. Some people heard about his death from the news, while others had lost touch with him and hadn't talked to him in years. While many celebrities are remembered with performances, tributes, and a lot of attention, Carson's funeral was quiet, just like his last days. But even though he chose to be quiet, the world did not forget him. People who worked with Carson and knew him well talked about how much he meant to them after he died. David Letterman, Jay Leno, Conan O'Brien, and many others called him the best late-night host of all time and praised his timing, intelligence, and ability to make people feel at ease. Letterman got emotional when he talked about Carson, who was both a hero and a private supporter. One surprising fact that came to light after Carson's death was that he kept writing jokes even after he retired. Some of those jokes were given to David Letterman, who used them in his opening monologues. It was a private gift from one performer to another, and Carson never took credit or told the public that he did it. It also showed that Carson never lost his love of comedy, even when he was retired. Another story about Carson that only came to light after his death was that he had given a lot of money to different charities. Some people gave money without telling him, and most of the donors were unknown. This kind of quiet generosity showed what he stood for and what kind of person he was when the cameras were off. He didn't want praise. He just wanted to help in his own way. In the end, Johnny Carson stayed a mystery. If you like this story, please like and subscribe for more videos like this.